Welcome to another deep dive. Have you ever found yourself, constantly striving to be good enough, maybe pushing yourself to do more just to feel safe or perhaps loved? It's this subtle but really powerful pressure, right? And often we can't quite figure out why it's even there. Today, we're taking a fascinating journey. We're dissecting excerpts from Elise Loehnen's book on our best behavior.
Hmm.
Our mission, really, is to unpack these hidden codes society seems to have installed in us, these ways we're conditioned to behave that often pull us away from who we really are. We'll explore how these pervasive ideas of goodness have shaped our lives, our relationships, even our most basic instincts.
Absolutely. And as we get into this material, what becomes really clear is just how deep these codes run.
Hmm.
I mean, deeply ingrained, the influence, well, everything, our self-worth, our relationships with money, with sex, even our own anger. So this deep dive, it offers a powerful framework for understanding where these ideas came from, and maybe more importantly, how we can start to, deconstruct them.
Okay, let's start at the beginning then. The author opens with a really potent personal story. She talks about feeling this weight of unreasonable expectations, like she was trying to be this saintly ideal just to feel safe and loved. And that leads her to this core idea: if you feel good enough, you'll be safe from judgment, loved. That really hits home, doesn't it? That feels universal.
It absolutely does. And what's so insightful, I think, is how our drive to understand why. Why is this happening? Often that drive is really an attempt to impose some kind of logic on what feels like a chaotic society. To
Hmm.
try and figure out the map's contours for safety, for success, just for survival. This links directly to something the anthropologist Ashley Montagu talked about, first nature and second nature.
Okay.
So first nature is basically our whole original genetic design. Second nature is how society shapes our beliefs, our behaviors, the overlay.
Right.
And Montague argued that because humans are the most educable species, we're also in danger of being taught many wrong and unsound things.
That's quite a thought. Our very ability to learn makes us vulnerable to learning the wrong things. So, what are some of these wrong and unsound things the book highlights?
Well, this deep dive points right at the seven deadly sins.
Okay.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Many of us think of them as purely religious, right?
Yeah, definitely.
But the source emphasizes they're not solely the provenance of the church. They've permeated culture way beyond that.
Yeah.
They weren't even in the Bible to start with. They actually began as 8 thoughts from a 4th century desert monk, Evagrius Ponticus.
8.
8. He's basically battling his own natural inclination toward emotion or passion. And get this, sadness was even one of the original 8 before it got dropped later on.
Wow, sadness is a sin. That's incredible. And how did these thoughts become, mainstream morality?
Well, the material shows how the church later kind of weaponized these concepts. It became this punch card of trespasses requiring penance, a way to coerce behavior, especially during really dark times like the Inquisition or the bubonic plague.
So, controlling people through their own instincts.
Exactly. This whole system encouraged us to deny our instincts, denying pride, pleasure, even securing our basic needs, releasing emotions, relaxing, desiring things, instead of trusting in our own sovereignty.
And the book traces this imposition of good versus bad behavior back further, right, to the roots of patriarchy.
Yes, it does. It describes how, for most of human history, we're talking 2.5 million years up to about 10,000 BCE societies, were more like partnership societies.
Not matriarchies specifically.
Not matriarchies, no, but women were definitely revered for their generative powers. There was no private property. The focus was on the collective we rather than an I.
So, how did we shift so dramatically away from that partnership model?
That's the big question. The source material points strongly towards the church becoming the mediator of God's will and, crucially, the enforcer of behavior. It even highlights how some early Christian texts, like the Gnostic Gospels, suggest a world where a direct connection to the divine was considered possible, no middleman needed. And the way figures like Mary Magdalene were portrayed as a whore for centuries, despite corrections much later in 1996 and 2016 that served a purpose. It helped undermine female leadership, establish a male-only and celibate succession, and basically seed the idea that women were somehow naturally inferior.
It's really staggering how these narratives were constructed and how long they've lasted. And this patriarchal view, the book says, it didn't just affect social roles, it impacted how we see the body itself.
Profoundly. Thinkers like Hobbes, Darwin, even Freud, They contributed to this idea that the body was sort of abhorrent, something base, something to be subjugated and overcome.
Right, like the mind, the intellect was the only thing that mattered.
Precisely.
Okay, so this mindset warped our view of the body. And you mentioned instincts earlier. How did it affect our relationship with work and rest? This brings us to sloth, doesn't it?
It does. And the history of sloth as a sin is fascinating. The deep dive shows it was central to Protestant ideology, really linked to Martin Luther and the Reformation. Early Protestants had this belief that grace came from hard and diligent work. Economist Max Weber famously argued this was the bedrock of capitalism.
The Protestant work ethic.
Exactly. And you see that echo today, right?
Yeah.
In an economy that constantly measures us by output.
Oh, definitely. Even monitoring white-collar workers with productivity tools.
Yeah, and the author, she shares her own struggles with workaholism, calling it an antidote to existential anxiety, a way to numb difficult feelings, exert control.
But here's the paradox the book points out. This relentless focus actually holds us back. It brings up psychiatrist Srini Pillai's research on the power of rest, of unfocus.
Right, he was apparently told off as a medical student for being a robotic thinker.
Yeah, told he'd never change the world if you don't build in these periods of unfocus. So why is unfocus so important?
Well, Pillai's work suggests that during these times, like doodling, daydreaming, even napping, we tap into the unconscious brain. And the unconscious can process something like 11 million bits per second. Compare that to the conscious brain's 60 bits. 60.
Wow, so we're literally burning ourselves out by trying to stay focused all the time.
Pretty much. We're missing out on this huge processing power by not allowing for that mental downtime.
Okay, shifting gears slightly, but still on these societal constructs. Let's talk about greed and money. The book does this interesting thing, tracing the Latin root of liberal generosity back to liberty, suggesting maybe freedom from being attached to money.
It's a really neat connection, the original idea being more about being a steward of wealth, not its jailer, as the book puts it.
But Martin Luther, you mentioned him with sloth. He felt the church lost its way here too.
He did. He was critical of the church accepting indulgences for salvation, basically letting people pay for the remediation of sins. He felt that greed in that system had almost become a twisted sort of virtue, disguised as being talented, smart, careful stewardship.
And today, it feels like wealth is just inextricably linked with opportunity and power, which leads to huge disparities. The source points out a pretty stark statistic. Among the Forbes top 40 billionaires, only 6 are women, and all 6 are heirs to fortunes amassed by men.
Yeah, that statistic really underscores how women are often conditioned around money. There's a great anecdote in the book about Gloria Steinem. She noted how crucial it was for women to talk about their fears, poverty, dependence, because for so long, money in our world equaled safety. And the book argues women are often taught it's impolite to talk about money. This leads to this reticence that actually costs us a lot. Well, we lack data. We feel embarrassed we want money at all, apparently, and often spend instead of save or invest. The book suggests the real hunger isn't actually for belongings, but for belonging. That sense of security, of belonging to oneself.
That deep hunger for belonging, it definitely extends into our intimate lives. Which brings us to lust and sexuality. So how does the book unpack the religious condemnation of sex? It's not just Adam and Eve, is it?
No, it's more complex. The source highlights St. Augustine in the 4th century. He really developed the theory of sex-based original sin, linking Adam and Eve's noticing their nakedness directly to lust.
Ah. Okay.
And the author kind of hints this might have been personal for Augustine. He wrote about his own struggles with frenzy and fornication.
And Eve gets the blame.
Eve took the fall, literally, as the book says, positioned as the temptress.
Right, but the source contrasts Augustine's view with Jesus's.
It does. It suggests Jesus pointed back to Genesis, viewing sex itself as God's gift and work, a spiritual and creative exercise for continuing the species. A very different take.
And the fallout from Augustine's view, from centuries of this conditioning, is still with us.
Absolutely. The source cites a 2020 meta-analysis bluntly titled, "He is a stud, she is a slut," confirming that these double standards endure.
Wow.
And girls, the book argues, are constantly redirected toward love as the only arena for taking off our clothing. We're kind of acculturated by fairy tales to believe life begins when a boy chooses us.
That's a powerful framing. So how does this affect our relationship with our actual bodies? The book critiques body positivity, right?
It does, yeah. It suggests body positivity can sometimes feel hollow because it still tells us how we should feel positive
Hmm.
and keeps the focus on the body as the standard bearer for our identity.
So what's the alternative?
The book proposes more of a neutrality, recognizing our bodies are often containers for so many of our traumas, many unprocessed. The author shares a really intense personal story about an MDMA-assisted therapy session. Her body released years of her trying to control and silence it. It showed her, I'm me, I'm not my biology.
That distinction is key, being in your body, not defined by it.
Exactly. And the book also reveals something quite striking, that heterosexual women often don't know what they want sexually
Why is that?
because they've been taught they shouldn't have any sexual wants at all. Research by Meredith Chivers is mentioned, showing physical arousal doesn't always match subjective desire.
Meaning?
Meaning, as the book puts it, a wet vagina is not an invitation for unwanted penetration. A critical point.
Absolutely critical. And the source makes another really interesting linguistic point about ravaging versus rape.
Yes, it distinguishes ravaging, described as mutual desire, ecstasy from rape, one-sided power. But notes, disturbingly, they stem from the same etymological root. It highlights how language itself can be complex and loaded.
It's clear these instincts around our bodies, desires, even rest have been heavily suppressed. What about emotions like anger? How has that been coded as bad?
Well, the author connects her own recurring jaw pain to this.
Mm-hmm.
A friend suggested it indicated a muzzled desire to bite someone.
Huh, okay, I can see that.
And she links this to the Enneagram Type 1 personality, the reformer, whose underlying passion is often latent anger, and their fixation is resentment from striving for perfection.
So anger gets pushed down and festers. What's the historical view on anger?
Interestingly, Thomas Aquinas, summarizing earlier church figures, actually defended anger. He saw it as a useful human emotion for achieving justice, even present in Jesus.
Really?
Yeah, but he added caveats. It could become disordered and sinful if expressed too easily, too vehemently, or if you stay angry too long.
Ah, the classic qualifiers, which leads to the question.
Exactly. Whose anger counts as valid? Whose anger is seen as righteous and whose is seen as disruptive or inappropriate?
And the book argues women in particular are conditioned against showing anger.
Very much so. The idea that good girls don't fight, good girls don't yell, that women often modulate what we say and how we say it, suppressing their own intuition or knowing just to preserve connection and comfort.
Which perpetuates what the author calls a male-voiced civilization.
Precisely. And here's a fascinating twist. Despite stereotypes about, say, angry black women, surveys from 2015 and 2017 actually found white women reported being the angriest group.
That is surprising. Why might that be?
The deep dive suggests it might be because white women lack the tools to unpack, metabolize, and understand their anger. Maybe they fear they have more to lose by challenging the status quo. This dynamic of prioritizing our whiteness over our gender, the book argues, actually reinforces their own submission.
Wow. And this suppressed anger, these unmet needs, they inevitably spill into relationships, right?
Yeah.
Leading to resentment.
Often, yes. The book mentions the work of doctors John and Julie Gottman, the relationship expert.
Ah, yes, the Four Horsemen.
Them. They found that a huge chunk, 69% of conflicts between couples will never be resolved, often just due to personality clashes. And those four horsemen, criticism, defensiveness, contempt, stonewalling, are strong predictors of divorce. Apparently, women tend to over-index on criticism while men lean towards stonewalling.
That rings true for many, I imagine. The book also touches on aggression between girls.
It does, yeah. Social aggression, backbiting, exclusion, rumors. It notes this is often imperceptible to the adults because it's covert. And this reflects a culture that kind of refuses girls access to open conflict. It speaks to that lowercase trauma of neglect, disconnection, what you don't receive. Terry Real's work with men is cited too, how wounded boys can become wounding men due to that internalized disconnection. And how the cure for that deep sadness isn't just being cheered up, it's grief, processing the loss.
Which makes Byron Katie's The Work seem incredibly relevant here, questioning our thoughts about what happened.
Exactly, asking, is that true about our stories, our grievances? Her point is powerful. We are disturbed not by what happens to us, but by our thoughts about what happened.
It comes down to that choice she presents. You can be right, or you can be free.
A tough choice sometimes.
Definitely. Okay, this leads us to the final sin the book really unpacks. Pride. Or rather, the suppression of it. The author shares her own story, parents worrying she'd get a big head if praised too much, leading to self-sabotage, discomfort with any kind of glory.
And this connects directly to a concept called egoism, which psychologist Craig Mulliken talks about. It's essentially a lack of healthy narcissism, healthy self-regard.
Echoism, like echo from the myth.
Precisely. And the book notes more women than men struggle with this, often driven by a deep fear of seeming narcissistic.
So how does that develop?
Well, Malkin explains that when those normal feelings of pride are shamed, people cut them out. They learn to fear taking up space, fear being a burden. And that shame, as Brene Brown famously says, is a tool of the oppressor. It keeps us playing small.
And this shame, the book suggests, often comes out sideways as envy, particularly between women.
Yes, calling envy the crux of woman-on-woman conflict, that leashing that pulls us back from expression, turning us into crabs in the bucket, pulling each other down.
That's a harsh image, but relatable. But the book reframes envy.
It does, powerfully. Instead of just seeing envy as bad, it argues envy can be a compass. It points us towards what our hearts yearn to do or be.
So when we shame another woman for acting big, for taking up space.
We are, in effect, oppressing our own potential. We're reinforcing the very limits we resent.
Wow. So the ultimate takeaway seems to be about reclaiming that pride, embracing our true selves.
Absolutely. And celebrating that. Valuing people not by how well they fit in, but by what they uniquely contribute. There's a beautiful line. The less you need to be to the world, the more you can be to yourself. It's about that internal validation first.
Learning to love ourselves before trying to love others.
Right. I was designed to be me. You were designed to be you. It is a betrayal of self to live out someone else's destiny. Powerful stuff.
So, okay, let's pull this all together. What does this mean for us listening right now? This whole deep dive, the hidden codes, the 7 deadly sins' real origins, patriarchy's long shadow. It shows just how deeply programmed we are, doesn't it? To deny our instincts, to conform.
It really does. But the hopeful part, the good news, is that understanding where it comes from, that's the first massive step to freeing ourselves,
Yeah.
to unyoking ourselves from its constraints, as the book says.
And the book even suggests the pandemic played a role here.
Yeah, interestingly, it suggests that despite the hardship, it was a sort of collective opportunity to reject old paradigms and craft new ones.
Yeah.
A forced timeout for many, allowing people to see the unsustainability of their old lives and maybe start to replumb themselves internally.
And finally, the book offers this radical reframing of the sins themselves, not as things to avoid at all costs,
But as neutral. Exactly. Invitations to look closer. Who we are, what we need, what we want, and how we can discover our purpose. They're data, not damnation.
So transforming society starts with transforming ourselves.
That's the argument. Starting at home with ourselves, taking responsibility for our own energy, letting go of that collective pressure cooker, returning to our first nature, allowing that internal equilibrium to reset.
Okay, so here's a final thought, maybe the most provocative one to leave you with from this deep dive. If that deepest hunger we feel isn't really for belongings, but for belonging to ourselves, how might your daily choices, your work, your relationships, how might it all shift if you truly surrendered to who you are meant to be, trusting your own internal compass as the ultimate guide, rather than all those external measures of goodness that society has worked so hard to install?